everyone, it's me, Aaron, and as you can probably tell from the title card and from everything else going on this channel all month long, this is not your normal episode of Comic Class. That is because we are now in October, and if you are a longtime fan of this channel, you know that every single October, we dedicate the entire month to Thorgy-ween, in which we take a look at our favorite creepy and spooky things from the world of pop culture, which means that all month long, Comic Class is being changed to Comic Crypt. And today, we are going to be taking a look at one of my personal favorite horror books that is on the stands right now, Ice Cream Man. You heard me. Yeah, if you look at this cover, you might not think that this is a horror series, because I certainly didn't. I remember when this book was first released, I was still working at the comic book store that I worked at for many years, and I and all my other coworkers, we looked at this book, and we had no idea what this was about. But we were intrigued by it. And then the book started getting really positive reviews. It started getting 9 out of 10s, 10 out of 10s. Almost everyone was giving this book a nearly, if not perfect score. So we all decided to take a look at it. We had no idea what this was. This is one of the most bizarre series I've ever picked up, and it took several issues before it finally clicked with me what this is. And after I realized what they were attempting with this series and what direction they were going in, I was all on board. And that was after the first couple issues. I'd like to come in here and say that after it gets a couple more issues in, they throw brand new elements into the series, which changes it up again and kept it constantly fresh, causing this to be a series that is a constant joy for me to read. And by constant joy, I mean it continuously freaks me out, but in a good way. So what is Ice Cream Man about? You're probably looking at that cover, you're seeing that guy with the big old smile holding up the ice cream scoop and everybody behind him all cheering him on. And you're thinking, oh, this looks like some Leave It to Beaver 1950s nostalgia kind of series. Maybe there'll be some social commentary. I don't know what they have planned for this book. I don't know what they're going to do in this series. Yeah, I didn't know they had planned for this book either, even after I read the first issue of this thing. That's because after you get a couple issues in, suddenly it dawns on you. This book is the Twilight Zone, except with a continuing storyline in the background. Imagine if the Twilight Zone, if Tales from the Crypt, if The Outer Limits, if all those series all took place within the exact same small town. Imagine if all that weird stuff that you always saw happening in the Twilight Zone, that was all happening in one tiny little Anytown, USA style city. And then, imagine if Rod Serling was not just some guy walking in front of the camera making a speech to you, the audience. He was actually a person inside that city. And he was going around interacting with all the people in the story. But he wasn't just interacting with them. He wasn't just telling you the story of what happened. He was the cause of all those things that was happening. Yeah, you know Rod Serling on The Twilight Zone? How he seems like, oh, he's such a nice, peaceful guy. Oh, he seems like he's calm and cool and collected, and he knows everything that's going on. He's the guide that I need in this crazy, chaotic world that is The Twilight Zone. Now imagine if all the terrible things that happened to the people in The Twilight Zone was all being caused by Rod Serling, because he had his own motivations that were completely secret to all of us. He would go from the calm, cool narrator to the insane sociopath with nearly godlike powers. That is terrifying to think of, and that's exactly what Ice Cream Man is. The very first issue of Ice Cream Man, it starts off with the Ice Cream Man. He's got his truck pulled up right there to the curb. All these kids are coming up, getting their ice cream from him. But then this one kid comes up with no parents. And the Ice Cream Man, he looks at him and goes, hey kid, where are your parents at? And I thought for a second, okay, I like this because the Ice Cream Man, he seemed like he was this two-dimensional figure, like just a cardboard cutout, like the most stereotypical 1950s sitcom version of an Ice Cream Man you could imagine. But then it looks like, okay, he's kind of breaking character here for a second, because this is a weird sight of a kid without any parents coming up here. But then he quickly returns back to being that cardboard cutout stereotypical character when he just pulls out that ice cream cone. Like, here you go, kid. It doesn't matter if your parents aren't here. Enjoy that scoop right there. The kid takes it, goes home, he starts licking it, and then he gets home, and his parents aren't just dead. They've been dead for a long time. They are basically mummified corpses just sitting there, and there's a spider roaming around the house. And the spider is insanely deadly, and it's the thing that killed his parents, and the kid's just totally cool with this. The kid clearly is not all there. So now you're looking at this tale that started out about being about some ice cream man. I mean, he's the titular character for God's sakes, and now he's just gone. He's not here. We're now following this story about this kid living with dead parents and a spider that just kills anyone that comes near him. Yeah, this was not the story I was expecting, and yet it got even weirder before the end of the first issue. Because then it cuts to a cop in the town who's starting to investigate this stuff, and they're taking these calls about weird things happening around the town, and there's a little old lady in the police station talking about a werewolf? Yeah, why is there a werewolf all of a sudden involved in this story? You'll find out why there's a werewolf involved in this story. Because as the story goes along, you follow these cops as they start to investigate these missing people, and then that leads them to the house of this kid. They discover the rotting remains of his parents there, and then one thing leads to another, and then they run into the woods, and then there's the werewolf. So you've got killer spiders, this kid living with corpses, police investigation, and a werewolf out of nowhere, and it's all tied back around into the ice cream man. And I had no idea what this book was. I remember after I and some of my other employees at the comic shop finished reading this first issue, we went, everybody's loving this thing. I don't know why everybody is loving this thing. We just talked about how we had no idea what this was. We just did not get it. But everybody kept saying it was great. You need to stick with this thing. Keep reading issue after issue. So I decided, fine, I'm going to come back to issue number 2. Issue number 2 was where I got sold, because there's a big supernatural element in that first issue. Issue number 2 is just a story about two junkies. And it's this story about how they met, how they fell in love, how they went down a darker path, how they got addicted, how they haven't been able to kick it, how now they are at that low point in their life, but they're going to try and turn things around for themselves one last time. But then one of the junkies ends up stealing the ice cream man's truck. And I won't spoil what happens next, but something terrible ends up happening to her. She races back home, and I didn't want to spoil that last thing, but I have to spoil this, because this was the moment that I realized, oh, I think I get what this book is now. Because she comes home, her partner is just sprawled out there. He's dying, and the ice cream man is just sitting in her chair. Just sitting there is like, yeah, so you took my truck. That wasn't very nice of you. And he basically ends up pulling a Morpheus on her. He basically comes in and goes, listen, I'm going to give you an option. I'm going to give you something. You can use that on yourself, or you can use it to help your partner over there. The choice is entirely yours. And that's it. They stole this man's truck, and suddenly he's where they live. And this is a guy who was involved in killer spiders and werewolves in the last issue. Who knows what he's capable of? And he just presents them with like this little tiny bit of temptation and then leaves. And I won't say what happens, but the decisions that get made with the thing that he ended up presenting them at the end of this issue ends up creating a huge, massive development for the characters that we had been following up until this point. And that was when it hit me. Oh, every single issue of this is going to be some different story that follows different characters with a completely different twist and a different tone and a different idea behind the story. But the ice cream man, this weird, nearly omniscient creature who even knows what he is, what his motivations are, he is the driving force of all these events. He is tied into every single one of these stories. And that is exactly what this book ended up becoming. For a little while, at least. Then it got even bigger, and I will talk about that in a second, but I gotta go into the third story here, the third issue of this, because the first issue, I don't know what the hell that was. But that was the point of it, to just come in here and give you this idea of all the different places and all the different directions that the future storylines for this comic could go. They've got this horror thing going on with the little kid, you've got a police investigation, you've got a werewolf in there, so many different elements from that first issue. Issue 2, far more focused, far more down to earth. The thing that happens in issue number 2, that's something that could actually really happen in the real world. There are technically no supernatural elements within the second issue. It is a much more down-to-earth, realistic story, and that was a completely different change in tone from that first issue. It was smart to go from that first issue to the second issue. Third issue is a science fiction story. And while the physical ramifications of what happened in the first 2 issues are greater than what happens to the character that we follow in the third issue, the psychological damage that ends up happening to the character in the third issue is so much worse than what we got in the first 2 issues. What happens to the character in the third issue is heartbreaking. If you are at all intrigued by this series by now, stop listening to this. Stop. Just go. Buy the book. Check it out right now. Because I have to come in here and talk about what happens in the third issue. Because the third issue is something entirely unique and special all in and of itself. The third issue follows this aging rock star. He is a guy who had one hit. Everybody loved that hit. And he got famous. And that was it. He spent his entire life trying to write another song. Something that would be that popular again. Something that would get people to come in there and praise him once again. But now he's just a sad guy sitting in a diner, hearing his song playing on the jukebox, thinking, I used to do that. I get any day now, I'm going to think of that second song. He's still just holding on to that. And the ice cream man comes in and offers him a free scoop of vanilla on the house. He eats that, and then he wakes up, and he is now in the future. And mankind is waging a war against alien invaders, and the only thing that can stop these aliens is his music. But he has to think of a second song. That's all he has to do. If he can think of a second song, one as good as his first song, it will save the world. It will be that thing that causes all the aliens to turn away and be defeated. It will give mankind the strength to rise up, and it will turn all the alien invaders away. It will be that thing that rescues humanity. Think about that. This guy has spent his entire life just sitting around going, any day now, I just need that second song. I can have that thing that I once had. I can have it again. I just need that second song. And now he's being told, if you don't come up with that second song, mankind is doomed. It's all on your shoulders. That 50 years of anxiety that you've been feeling, yeah, it's all boiling down to this one moment. So he's got so much weight on his shoulders right now. And again, I'm sorry, but I gotta spoil how this thing ends because it just sums up what this book is about. At the end of this issue, he finally gets it. He finally has that moment of clarity. He strums his guitar, he starts singing, and then he just wakes up back in that diner again. And he's looking around and he's saying, did I do it? I wrote a second song. I wrote a second song. Did it save the world? And everybody's just looking at him like, oh my God, you're crazy. And everybody just looks at him with disgust and just walks away, leaving him to know that for a brief second, he had it. That thing he has wanted his entire life, he had it only so it could be immediately taken away from him again. That is crushing. And that's the kind of stuff that the characters suffer through in Ice Cream Man. But what's really nuts to me is that all the stuff that I just described to you, that's stuff that you find in the first volume. The book changes when you get to the second volume, while still remaining the same. Okay, I know that's a crazy sentence, but hold on, let me just explain. There is a new element that gets introduced at the very end of the first trade. The Ice Cream Man gets an adversary. Someone pops up who basically goes over to the Ice Cream Man and says, I know what you've been doing. I know who you are. I'm here to stop you. And the Ice Cream Man just looks at him like, it's you. And we don't know who this guy is. There's no explanation given to who this person is, but you know that he and the Ice Cream Man have some kind of a history with each other. It seems almost like an angel and demon kind of situation, like, yeah, you've been messing with things for a long time, but now I'm down here to save the day. So you're looking at him and you're thinking, oh my goodness, now this story is going to be all about the Ice Cream Man versus whoever this mysterious stranger is. And it isn't. But at the same time, it kind of is, because after that, the story continues in the exact same way. Every single issue is still an anthology issue, focusing on a specific character, going through some crazy situation that is set up by the Ice Cream Man. But now there's this new stranger walking around. But the stranger doesn't run in there and go up to any of these protagonists and say, hey, here's everything that's going on. Here's all the information that you need to know. No, they just kind of pop up in the background. And they might pop in for one moment to say one quick line. And that one quick line will speak volumes. It will let you know, oh man, I don't know what's happening, but that guy does. So if he's here, something serious is going on behind the scenes. And I honestly love the way that they were able to do this. I do, because yes, it might be frustrating that there is this big story happening behind the scenes that you don't understand at all. But at the same time, I love that they decided to go in that direction, because the premise of the Ice Cream Man is it's the Twilight Zone. Except if Rod Serling was the one controlling all this, and he was evil. But Rod Serling is still invisible to everyone in the story of each episode of The Twilight Zone. He just comes in there to be the narrator, to come in and give an introduction to the reader at home. He's not there to actually interact with the people in the stories, and he's not there to be the center of attention of the stories. And that's what the Ice Cream Man continues to do. It continues to be stories about the people who are living in this town, suffering through the things that they've been suffering through. But now you get this sense that there is something happening to Rod Serling. And yet, Rod Serling is still not the main focus of each episode of The Twilight Zone. He's still the behind-the-scenes guy to The Twilight Zone. So it becomes this very odd story behind another story that's being affected by that story that's behind the story that we're not actually seeing. It's a very crazy concept, but when you read it, I think it's actually pulled off pretty darn well. And there will be developments that happen in that story behind the story that we're not actually seeing that makes you realize, oh man, there's something really cool happening over there. And even though I don't understand it, what I was able to understand makes me realize that there is going to be a huge development in the main stories that we are following. I don't know if anything I just said makes sense, but what I do know is that Ice Cream Man is a great book to read this Halloween. This is one of those series out there that it's not about ghosts and goblins. Well, okay, some of the stories are about ghosts and goblins, but it's not all about the kind of things that you would typically associate with Halloween. However, if you're someone like me, and when you think of Halloween, you think of stuff like The Twilight Zone, you think of things like Tales from the Crypt, all those old horror anthologies that take on a wide variety of stories, this is an excellent comic book version of those. It's something that pays tribute to those old anthologies, while at the same time creating something that is entirely its own thing. So go out there, check out The Ice Cream Man. It is up to 3 trades right now, and every single one of them are easily worth reading. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you have any other spooky horror comics that you want me to talk about this month, leave a suggestion in the comments down below, or you can reach me on Twitter and Twitch at Professor Thorgy. And while we will be back next week with another episode of Comic Crypt, every single day this month, we are doing other videos all dedicated to everything spooky and scary in honor of Halloween. Because gosh darn it, we look forward to this every single year, so I hope you guys enjoy this month as much as we do. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and happy Halloween.